Hi everyone, my name is Erin Fierro and I'm going to talk to you today about the work that I and some of my collaborators have done on the characterization of tunable magnetic domains in magnetized lanthanum aluminate strontium titanate or LaO-STO interfaces. So before we get started, just a little bit about the LaO-STO structure. Usually when we're talking about LaO-STO, we're talking about the interface. There is a high mobility quasi-two-dimensional electron gas here. The region is tunable across the metal insulator transition by biasing or by growing the LaO beyond a critical thickness. And the region is also superconductive at low temperature. So a lot of electric properties that are very interesting and tons more that I didn't list. But I'm actually more focused on the magnetic side of things. The magnetic behavior here is very interesting. It's been reported to be somewhat inconsistent and still remains poorly understood. There have been reports of room temperature ferromagnetism at the interface. Squid imaging has shown the coexistence of ferromagnetism and superconductivity at the same time, and MFM imaging has shown that the magnetic domains at the interface are electronically tunable. So why is this magnetism so difficult to understand? Right now, what we think is going on is we believe that there are two primary sources to the magnetic behavior that we see. These gray markers are representing local moments, and we believe that they're the first source of the magnetic behavior that we see. You can think of the local moments as sort of like atomic scale magnets. The second source that we think is causing this behavior is electron-electron interactions. There are a lot of electronic phases that are possible at this interface, and each of them sort of has its own metamagnetic behavior that can be somewhat difficult to predict and understand. And the way these itinerant electrons interact with one another, as well as how they sort of navigate this landscape of local moments, all impacts the overall magnetism that we measure. So of course, my work is built on the research, on a huge body of research, but I do want to highlight three key experiments in particular that are sort of the building blocks to what I'm doing. The first key experiment that I want to talk about is the stoichiometric control of the magnetic order at the interface. This experiment, published in 2020, it showed that the magnetic order at the interface is largely dependent on the LaO, and in particular the aluminum. Samples with a lot of aluminum vacancies have strong magnetic responses, while aluminum-rich samples, that response is suppressed. So this helps to explain somewhat some of the inconsistent behavior that you can see plotted out here. Part of it just came down to being very careful with these LaO growth parameters. The second key experiment, I mentioned before that these magnetic domains are electronically tunable. This was an MFM imaging experiment that was done in 2014. MFM imaging is independent of topography, and it measures magnetic domains by measuring frequency changes in the cantilever tip, which is magnetized, so it will be pushed or pulled if it encounters a magnetic field. In this experiment, a gold electrode was used as a top gate. It is not in contact with the 2-deg, but it is able to bias and sweep across that metal insulator transition. And here are the major results from that experiment. So you can see in the insulating state, there are clear magnetic domains with high contrast. As we step up our bias towards the conductive state, you can see that the contrast starts to sort of wash away until these domains disappear. And then, stepping back down from the conductive state, we see domains re-emerge again. So we know that we can tune back and forth between ordered magnetic domains and this conductive state where there are no magnetic domains. And the third experiment that is important is this optically addressable magnetism in STO. So this focuses on just STO alone. This was a pump probe experiment that was conducted in 2014. And what it showed is that there is magnetism, a magnetic response in STO, and that is optically tunable. It is both polarization and wavelength dependent. So here in this figure C, you can see these peaks. They are roughly equal and opposite for left or right-handed circularly polarized pumps. And there are these peaks at about 425, 450, and 475. These are convenient peaks to work with because they are far from the STO band gap, which is between about 330 nanometers to 380 nanometers. And so we don't have to worry about exciting any electrons in the STO, but we can sort of use this response to pumping as almost like a built-in gain feature. And we can use this response to enhance our measurements of the interface. So my goal is to observe the dynamics of a magnetic transition using ultrafast optics. We want to see these transitions as they're occurring in time to try and really pin down the mechanism. In order to do that, we need to have a handle on the structural elements at play. We now have that. We know that the LAO growth parameters are very important to these behaviors that we see. We need to be able to drive the transition. We know that we can do this by biasing. And we need to be aware of potential optical interference from STO and take some advantage of some of the properties of STO. So we've got that down too. To make my measurements, I'm going to be taking advantage of the magneto-optic Kerr effect. This is when polarized light interacts with a magnetized surface and its angle of polarization is rotated. You can analyze the reflected light and calculate this angle of difference. That's going to be proportional to the magnetization. We can get all three directions, so we can get fields that are normal and both in plane directions just by adjusting our configuration of optics. And this is what my scanning microscope looks like. I've got a titanium sapphire laser that is a femtosecond laser. It outputs at 850 nanometers, which we frequency double down to 425, which was one of those STO peaks. We polarize and focus down onto an LAO STO sample, and we're using a graphene top gate because it's both conductive and transparent. After the reflection, the light will travel through our analyzer here and split into two orthogonal components. So you can think of this as the horizontal and the vertical components if you'd like. And the balance detector will give us the difference between the signal and the reference. We can use that to calculate our angle of rotation, and from that we can find our the magnetization out of plane. If we'd like to make in-plane measurements, we just make some adjustments to our polarizer here and replace this balance detector with a quad photodiode. Both channels are fed to lock-ins, and again we can solve for this angle and get our in-plane magnetization as well. Here are a couple of LAO STO images that I have taken. These are at room temperature with no biasing. This is an MFM image here on the left. You can see there are some large domains and some smaller domains scattered around. In the scanning Kerr image, the MOKE image, you can see a large domain, but you see that we did lose some of that spatial resolution. That is okay because we're going to more than make up for that in time. So for our ultrafast experiment, we are going to be gating our sample with that graphene electrode using a gigahertz frequency signal. We will phase lock that signal to the repetition rate of my femtosecond laser. The femtosecond laser is only on for about 100 femtoseconds. So you can think of it as off all of the time, and then there is a 100 femtosecond long burst of light, and that's the only actual time that the light is interacting with the sample. And so that's really the only time we're making a measurement, is in this window of time. So by just sweeping the phase, the bias phase, we're actually able to effectively sweep in time on the order of picoseconds. And so we hope to be able to drive this transition from the insulating state to the conductive state and back again, so we can observe those transition dynamics as they're occurring. So just to wrap it all up, I've told you that LAO STO has many tunable features, electronic and magnetic. Recent advancement in sample growth and characterization has let us know that LAO is a dominant factor. The LaO stoichiometry is a dominant factor in the magnetic behaviors that we see at the interface. My scanning Kerr microscope is capable of imaging domains at this interface, and our pump probe experiment will give us picosecond time resolution so that we can observe the dynamics of this transition. Thank you all very much, and please let me know if you have any questions.